And now let's return to our top story tonight. Sara Sharif. Before she was even born, little Sara was known to social services. Authorities knew that her father was a serial perpetrator of domestic abuse. But after a string of failures, Sara was left in his care and murdered by him and her stepmother when she was 10 years old. Well, throughout her short life, Sara was let down by the authorities that should have ensured her safety. In fact, just 2 days before her death, council officials tried to visit the family home to check on her, but went to the wrong address. In just a moment, I'll hear from the Children's Minister. I've had a conversation with him to try and find out what the government is doing to finally bring about change for children like Sara. But first, Rachel Venables has this report.
Take a deep breath and tell me what's happened.
I cannot. I physically punished my daughter and she died.
Your daughter has died?
I killed my daughter.
How have you killed your daughter?
I beat her up. It wasn't my intention to kill her, but I beat her up too much.
That was the 999 call Irfan Sharif made after murdering his daughter and fleeing to Pakistan. A caring, confident little girl who'd loved singing and dancing. The abuse Sara Sharif suffered at home was later described in court as torture. But social services had been involved in her case since her birth, so why wasn't more done to protect her? A new independent safeguarding report has called Sara's father and stepmother a lethal combination who should never have been trusted with her care. Yet it's clear throughout her short life there were warnings that she was at risk at home. This report says the system failed to keep Sara safe. Amongst the key points and findings were the fact the authorities knew Irfan was a serial perpetrator of domestic abuse, but that information was overlooked, not acted on, and underestimated by almost all professionals. When the school told social services months before her death about bruising on Sara's face, safeguarding processes weren't followed. Sara was then taken out of school, but the report found her father and stepmother had used home education to keep Sara hidden from view.
The report's very clear that the people that are responsible for the trauma that Sara suffered and ultimately her murder are in prison where they should be. The report's also clear that there were actions that could and should have been taken by this organisation, and they weren't, and for that I profoundly apologise.
While in a statement, Surrey's Safeguarding Children Partnership said all agencies represented by the partnership take the findings of this report extremely seriously and will work urgently together to agree a joint action plan that puts in place the local learnings from the review. Throughout her short life, the authorities clearly missed multiple opportunities to share information, join the dots and ultimately protect Sara from abuse.
I think there was a lack of professional curiosity. I think there were failings right the way through. The home education team went to check on her at home, got the wrong address and didn't go back. And the next day she was dead. And I think there needs to be accountability. This cannot happen again.
The report contains 15 recommendations, including national calls to change the rules on homeschooling and to provide better training for safeguarding teams on domestic abuse. It's clear now that little Sara was badly failed, not just by her family, but by the state, the very institutions whose job it is to protect vulnerable children like her. Rachel Venables, Sky News in Surrey.
It's a familiar and grim pattern. You'll be familiar with it as Children's Minister. Death, investigation, report, learnings and recommendations, apology, rinse and repeat. What I want to know is, in your position as Children's Minister, right now, what are you doing to actually stop this from happening again? Because until now, nobody successfully has.
I'm currently sat in Wolverhampton with a whole bunch of people the other side of that wall who are setting up one of the first multi-agency child protection teams in the country. And what the government are doing is making a whole series of changes, landmark, once-in-a-generation changes to our child protection system across England. We're rolling it out later on this year and into next year, so that we can have a more expert, decisive child protection response for these sorts of cases. I don't want to be saying to you and your viewers that we'll learn the lessons. That phrase has been used far too many times before. What we need to do is implement the lessons that we've learned over the years. I, as Children's Minister, get a fortnightly report of all of the tragic cases, some of them not avoidable, and many of them, unfortunately, in cases where signs and opportunities were missed. So I am absolutely determined, as is the whole government, to make this better.
So how is this task force, this specialist unit you're putting together, going to be different? How are they going to make the changes that professionals working in local councils haven't been able to up until now?
Yeah, we do have many social workers and child protection teams across the country that have done a really good job, and every single day identify significant harm, intervene quickly where they can and keep children safe. But it isn't consistent enough, and what we're doing through the introduction of multi-agency child protection teams is fusing together in one team professionals from health, police and social work, so they're permanently sat together in one unit, sharing each other's data, information and systems, and responding as one expert group when there are concerns about significant harm. We're also making sure that the people that are in those teams have got the experience, the qualifications to be able to make some of those really difficult judgment calls, because they're not straightforward. And that is learning from a lot of what we've seen in the past. That's on top of the introduction of a Children Not in School register, which is in the current Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, and also changes on information sharing. So the government, since the election last year, has set in motion a whole suite of changes which will make a difference.
And when will that make a difference? When will that be seen, you know, on people's doorsteps, in children's front rooms? When will they feel the benefit?
Well, here in Wolverhampton, it's happening already. We've started the introduction of multi-agency child protection teams.
And is that going to be rolled out nationwide?
Things like the Children Not in School register. It's being rolled out nationwide, and we've got the funding to do it, and we're passing the laws to make it happen as well. That bill is in Parliament right now. I want that bill to pass as soon as possible. It's with the House of Lords, and then it'll come back to the House of Commons, and I would urge all parliamentarians to help that bill pass as soon as possible so that we can get these child protection measures through.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that bill in just a moment, but I also want to talk about responsibility and accountability, because clearly that has been lacking in so many cases similar to Sara Sharif. And you could say here as well, we do hear a lot about accountability and what that looks like. Those directly responsible for her death are behind bars, but this little girl, as this report today showed, was known to social services from birth. She was in and out of foster care. The school reported bruises on her face in the build-up to her death. In fact, the day before, social services went to pay a house visit but got the wrong address. Children's services, social services, the local authority, they failed in their job, and their job was to protect her. How are they held responsible for that?
So look, the review that's been published today is really clear that what has happened here is a cumulative effect of lots of opportunities that were missed, errors in how information was shared, issues in the family court with domestic abuse, with
we know all of that.
Sarah's
as I said,
taking
with
her out
the
of
greatest
school.
of respect, we hear that every time a child is killed or is abused whilst under the protection of a local authority. What I'm asking is, will people be held responsible? At the very least, people losing their job time and time again, we get these reports, but nobody is held responsible in any other walk of life, in your job, in mine, with those kind of failings you were just starting to list there. We would be out the door. Often, people would be in court. We see none of that in these cases. And do we need that?
Well, look, we do have a system of accountability for children's social care. It's through Ofsted and Ofsted inspections. They've seen that in Surrey, the local authority where this was the case, that things have improved since Sarah's death, which is really positive. But yeah, we do need to make sure we're holding the system to account so that it's got the conditions right for good decisions to be made,
to make a difference? As I said, you know, you hear about NHS trusts failing and they are given record fines. I mean, what should happen here to incentivise people to actually do their job properly? Because there has to be accountability where massive, fatal mistakes are made.
Yeah, well, look, there's a few things that we need to do. One is inspection needs to continue to focus on child protection. It needs to also look at other agencies that are involved, not just children's social care. So police and health partners are really crucial, and they were an important part sometimes of the missing piece of the puzzle here. We're also introducing, and this is off the back of the independent inquiry into sexual abuse, we're going to be introducing a national child protection authority. I'll be publishing plans about how that will work before Christmas, so that will come forward. That agency will hoover up all the intelligence that we've got and help local areas learn and implement those changes. But the thing that I would stress really is that child protection decision making is notoriously difficult. What sometimes retrospectively looks really obvious at the time for a professional in the room isn't always as obvious. So it's having the systems where people can be super curious, ask lots of questions, not be afraid to go to someone with more expertise about child abuse, and get expert opinions. That's exactly what we're doing with the introduction of multi-agency child protection teams. That's what's happening here in Wolverhampton, where I'm sat right now.
Minister, just while I have you, you may have seen our reporting earlier this week on the care system, which again falls under your remit, and the care cliff facing children when they turn 18, the support system simply taken away from them. They're on their own, kicked out is how some care leavers have described it to me. We brought people the story of Nonita, who just days after her 18th birthday took her own life. She repeatedly told her corporate parent, the local authority, that she was going to do it and how she was going to do it. It's in her records, yet she died. Her story, not new, not unusual. 91 care leavers died, those aged between 16 and 25, just last year. That's 2 young people a week. Will you be the government to come up with a plan to address the care cliff?
Yes, we will. This is an issue that matters a lot to me. I saw the documentary that you and your brilliant colleagues did on Nonita, and I think you've shone a spotlight on this that's much needed. I read the details of every single one of those care leaver deaths, and they're harrowing because these are young people who've been left often isolated and alone from 16 upwards, living in semi-independent accommodation that often isn't appropriate. And one of the big reasons they're vulnerable and often end up tragically taking their own lives is because we've not built a care system that puts lifelong loving relationships around these young people. So there's 2 big things that are a priority for me. One is the introduction of more support for care leavers with accommodation options and wraparound support for them. And secondly, and this I think would have been would have made a big difference in the documentary that you had earlier this week for Nonita, is expanding the number of foster carers we have in this country. I think, from my memory of reading about her story, she wanted to live in a foster home. She wanted a family home environment. We don't have enough foster carers, and we urgently need to do something about that. I will be setting out plans very soon for how we're going to dramatically expand the number of foster homes in England.
Well, we look forward to seeing those. I was privileged enough to meet care leavers on Tuesday night as part of our special programme, sparked by Nonita's story. And I met a number of campaigners who you will know well from before you got into government. They're proposing amendments to the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill that you mentioned a little earlier. It's currently going through Parliament, as you said. Those campaigners have got direct experience of this failing care system, and they say that the amendments they want made will better protect children and ultimately save young lives. I'm just going to explain to those watching what they are briefly. One is for care to be recognised as a special characteristic alongside race, religion, gender, disability, affording them essentially all the other protections offered to those groups. The other is about corporate parents or local councils that have these children in their care. They want to change the wording of part of the bill from those corporate parents being alert to issues with children in care to them having due regard to their issues. Essentially, the difference being if you're alert to something, you can see it, but you don't have to do anything about it. But if you have due regard for something, it means you'll actually have to do something about it by law when there are problems. Do you support these campaigners and these amendments?
So I know these campaigners personally. They're wonderful people who have done a huge amount in their time to improve the care system for tens of thousands of others and other young people to come in the future. I'm already in contact with those campaigners about their asks, and I'm keen to explore them with them. The government's priority with the bill has been making sure that we get cross-government agreement so we can effectively roll out a big expansion of corporate parenting. Now that doesn't sound maybe that exciting, but it will make a big difference because, for example, it will mean the NHS, all NHS bodies across the country will have to start behaving like a corporate parent for care experienced young people. That is going to make a huge difference. The government introduced that measure in a bill after only a few months of being in power, and I really want to make sure that we get those changes implemented well, but I of course will always speak to those campaigners and I'll explore those amendments that they're proposing as well.
OK, so you don't support those specific amendments anymore because you're a bit more clear-cut on the issue before coming into government. In May 2022, you published a major review into children's care. It said, and I quote, "The disadvantage faced by our care experience community should be the civil rights issue of our time." It said that to change this, the UK should be the first country in the world to recognise the care experience as a legally protected characteristic in equalities legislation. You're not being as clear about that today. Why not? Have you changed your mind on this?
So I am just as clear about the nature of the problem. This is the biggest social justice issue, I think, facing the country.
So can you help them get it into law?
Working on.
Can you help them make it into legislation?
Well, yes, I am. We're trying to do that with the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill. And as I say, the first step on that track really is about expanding corporate parenting. That will make a massive difference. Corporate parenting just for local authorities has been around for a number of years, but it's been limited just to local authorities. The power of expanding protected characteristics to include the care experience. Obviously, when I wrote the review, that was something I was advocating for. I'm now part of the government, and my job is to work with colleagues on areas where we can get collective agreement and make sure we get the biggest changes possible for young people as soon as possible. That's why my attention and the department's attention is on expanding corporate parenting.
Josh McAllister, the Children's Minister, speaking to me earlier on today. Now, tonight there's fresh pressure on the BBC amid claims that another programme edited President Trump's January 6th speech 2 years before that now controversial Panorama edit. Let's bring in Sky's Emma Birchley, who's been following this latest development. So talk to us about this programme, this happening some time before the Panorama edit.
Yeah, yet another flagship BBC programme, this time Newsnight. And in fact, the programme we're talking about aired in June of 2022, so more than 2 years before the Panorama programme that we have heard so much about over the last week or so. And in fact, it's the same speech we're talking about, a speech by Donald Trump in January of 2021. Now, the edit wasn't exactly the same in both programmes, but it was very similar. Fundamentally, taking a chunk out of the middle, and by taking that chunk out of the middle, changing the meaning, so that suggesting that supporters walk with him to the Capitol building and fight like hell. Now,
that was the Newsnight interview. Of course, this all started with the Panorama edit. I've just got this in. This is just breaking news, Emma, which relates to this story. We're just hearing that the BBC has apologised to Donald Trump over the editing of a speech which appeared on Panorama in 2024, adding it was an error of judgment and the programme will not be broadcast again in this form on any BBC platform. So that's the BBC apologising directly to the President of the United States over the editing of a speech that appeared on Panorama in 2024. But Emma, by the sounds of it, there might be another apology to make.
Yeah, so that was the one that's caused such a furore over the last week or so that resulted on Sunday night in the Director General of the BBC, the big boss, Tim Davie, resigning. Also, the Chief Executive of BBC News, Deborah Turness, both of those leaving their roles. Then the BBC chair apologising for what he called an error of judgment. So this really has been the focus of enormous attention. Now we're talking about this Newsnight programme. And what's really interesting about it, according to The Telegraph, who've broken this story, a live guest straight after that speech was played out on Newsnight, pointed out that it had been cut incorrectly, changing the meaning. And according to the Telegraph, nothing was done on air to say apologise or to address that.
Yeah, to
and
alert
then
people that it had happened.
Yeah, and then the next morning in an editorial meeting, it said that it was discussed there, concerns were raised, nothing was done then. There has been a response from the BBC, a BBC spokesperson saying the BBC holds itself to the highest editorial standards. This matter has been brought to our attention and we are now looking into this. It's really important, just quickly, to say that the timing here is absolutely crucial because a lawyer for Donald Trump threatened to sue the BBC for a whopping $1 billion, saying they needed an apology. Well, we got that now, haven't we? And a retraction. It's not been played again with false, defamatory, disparaging and inflammatory statements. And the deadline was Friday,
Tomorrow.
10 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that apology has come in. Emma, for the moment, thank you. Just to reiterate that breaking news, the BBC has apologised to Donald Trump over the editing of a speech which appeared on a Panorama programme back in 2024. The organisation saying it was an error of judgment and the programme will not be broadcast again in this form on any BBC platforms. Now, the former Prince Andrew reportedly told Jeffrey Epstein, "I can't take much more of this," in response to claims about to be published in a newspaper in 2011. The email, which appears to have been sent by Andrew to distance himself from the claims, is one of more than 20,000 documents released by the Congressional Committee investigating Epstein. Our US correspondent David Blevins joins me now from Washington to bring us up to date because a lot of information has been coming out over the last 48 hours, thousands of documents.
That's right, pressure on the US President, arguably pressure on the UK Prime Minister over more documents suggesting a closer tie between Jeffrey Epstein and Lord Mandelson than had been previously reported, and certainly more pressure on Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And let me explain why. In March 2011, Andrew appeared to tell Epstein and his girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell, "I can't take any more of this," after the newspaper said they would be running a story about the three of them. That email gets forwarded a few times, eventually from Epstein to an address labelled The Duke. And Andrew appears to reply, "What? I don't know any of this. How are you responding?" Epstein responds, "Just got it 2 minutes ago. I've asked lawyers to send a letter. Not sure. It's so salacious and ridiculous. I'm not sure how to respond. The only person she didn't have sex with was Elvis." The subject title on that email is Ghislaine Maxwell. Then Andrew seems to say, "Please make sure that every statement or legal letter states clearly that I am not involved and that I knew and know nothing about any of these allegations. I can't take any more of this. My end." Then 2 days later, Epstein emails someone called the Duke again just to check in. He writes, "You okay? These stories are complete and utter fantasy. I don't know and have never met Al Gore. Clinton was never on the island. The telephone book is not mine. It was stolen by my houseman that is currently in prison for doing so." So for the royal family, much like the White House, this really is the issue that will not go away. We have asked Andrew Mountbatten Windsor for a response, haven't received one so far, but of course he has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing.
David, thank you. David Blevins with the latest from Washington. A British couple jailed in Iran have gone on hunger strike. Craig and Lindsay Foreman were on an around-the-world motorbike trip when they were arrested by Iranian authorities back in January, accused of espionage. The couple deny the charges and are being held in Tehran's notorious Evin prison. Well, I'm joined now by their son, Joe. Joe, thank you so much for coming on to the UK tonight to highlight the plight of your parents held in Iran since the start of the year. When was the last time you spoke to them?
Quite recently. So I spoke to my mum on Tuesday. So that's the third time in just under 11 months that I've been able to speak to my mum. It was pretty emotional. It wasn't a great call, to be honest with you. I think for the first time, she let true emotions come through. Wasn't trying to protect me as much, I don't think, because she was really down. And also confirmed to me at that point that she was on a hunger strike, and yeah, it was hard to hear, and hard to hear her as upset as she was.
And going on a hunger strike is a last resort for so many people who are detained, and it's a cry for help, isn't it? An appeal, a plea, a desperate plea to authorities to help them. What communication are you getting from British authorities? What communication are they getting, if any?
I think that's the problem, that the communication's very fractured. You know, there's so many different parts of the system that we're trying to get into. So it is hard. I mean, in terms of communication between the Foreign Office and us, it's always been good. As soon as they hear anything, they're relaying that to us. But that's where the frustration starts to creep in, because the communication is one thing, but it's the actions that are, ultimately going to get them both home. But the fact that the only way to be heard was to stop eating, it tells you, as you say, everything about how desperate they are. I'm glad, we found out today that they've stopped. So that, it was 4 or 5 days, but it was all to do with getting to see each other and having family calls. So nothing outrageous at all, but things that have been promised to them that just haven't been delivered. And that was their only thing that they could do, and they just felt let down.
Yeah, of course, they'll be very isolated. As you said, communication between them. Have they had any contact with each other since they were detained?
I think this is one of the problems that, and the reason they did the hunger strike is because they were promised to be able to see each other once a week. And my mum on that call on Tuesday explained to me that, Craig was in a room for a couple of hours waiting for his wife to walk in, not having seen her in weeks. Just to have that pulled, and say it was cancelled and all rushed out, that must, the mental sort of strain that puts you under is immense. And I got a real sense of that on us saying the call on Tuesday. There was an air of desperation, and it was hard to hear coming from, the person that means the most to me in this world.
Yeah. And Joe, difficult to know when you might hear from your mum next. Your mum and dad detained for espionage, spying, essentially. What do you understand about the circumstances of their detention and what they're being accused of, the detail of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, because we haven't had any sort of concrete information that's come out of these court cases, and that, again, it poses challenges. However, the understanding is that my mum has documented it. They were traveling around the world and they were asking people, what a good life means to them. No matter where they're from, she did it in Spain, Italy. And I think that what they're trying to pin it on is that the questions that were being asked were to change regime altering questions that were targeting women. These are the kind of things that have been coming out, which is just utter nonsense, right? The only, which isn't a crime, the only thing that they're guilty of is traveling. That's all they've done wrong. And that's not a crime, right? So they're caught up in a system that...
I'll be reading all of it, Neil.
...is treated, it's really bad, it's treated, it needs to be approached in a different way by the government. At the moment, they're dealing with it as if it's a sort of family matter, like it's a petty crime, but it's espionage. They're being accused of spying for the British state, and the government aren't coming out and denying those allegations and wholeheartedly saying that we're behind the family to get them home.
You have met the UK Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper. I understand you met her last month to discuss your parents' case. What did you say to her? Because, as you said, these are serious charges they're being held under, and there seems to be no movement. They're just in no man's land, if you like. What did you say to Yvette Cooper, and what was her response to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how it feels at the moment, is that we're in a stalemate situation. It's almost like one's waiting for the other, and there seems to be a policy at the moment which is just to sort of allow the process to unfold. And when it's as unjust as what's going on, it doesn't make any sense to me. And there's almost this unwillingness to want to interfere, even though that we know that the charges that are being brought against them are completely false. So, you know, brought that to the attention. What are the plans? We've seen in various reports from various NGOs and you know, everything in between, that it's easier to do a deal or negotiate a release pre-sentencing, and I don't know why we're not acting on that. So it was really to try and push that agenda. Is that at the moment I don't feel like our core goals are aligned. That's the honest truth. You know, my core goal is to get them both home, and at the moment it feels as though their core goal is to offer consular and welfare access. And in my eyes, that should be a byproduct of the ultimate goal, right? And that's just where it doesn't feel like we're aligned at the moment. And I think that's what is needed.
Yeah. Joe, I can't imagine how frustrating and worrying this time is for you. Thank you so much for coming to shine a spotlight on what's happening to your parents in Iran. Thank you. And I hope that when we speak again, we have better news to discuss. And I really hope you get to speak to your mum or dad, hopefully both of them, soon. Joe, thank you so much. Joe Bennett, their son of Craig and Lindsay Foreman, detained in Iran on suspicion of espionage. Well, we have had this statement from the Foreign Office. It says, we are deeply concerned by reports that Craig and Lindsay Foreman have been charged with espionage in Iran. We continue to raise this case directly with the Iranian authorities. The FCDO are providing them with consular assistance and remain in close contact with their family members. Well, we're going to return to that breaking news. The BBC tonight apologising directly to Donald Trump over the editing of his January 6th speech in an episode of Panorama that aired last year. Let's bring in Sky's Emma Birchley, because I understand that we have the BBC statement in full now.
Well, we appear to have two statements. The latest one says that BBC Chair Samir Shah has separately sent a personal letter to the White House making clear to President Trump that he and the corporation are sorry for the edit of the President's speech on the 6th of January 2021, which featured in the programme. The BBC has no plans to rebroadcast the documentary Trump, A Second Chance on any BBC platforms. While the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, we strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim. So, we'd already heard, just a matter of minutes ago, an apology. That was what we'd been sent, saying that the programme had been reviewed after criticism of how President Donald Trump's speech was edited. We showed excerpts taken from different parts of the speech. However, we accept that our edit unintentionally created the impression that we were showing a single continuous section of the speech rather than excerpts from different points, and gave the mistaken impression that he'd made a direct call for violent action. And the BBC would like to apologise to President Trump for that error of judgment. The programme was not scheduled to be rebroadcast and will not be broadcast again. So that was the initial apology that we got a few moments ago. Then this latest bit makes it very clear, right at the end, we strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim. So this is crucial because tomorrow was the deadline for decisions to be made, apologies to be made, retractions, because a lawyer for Donald Trump had said that the BBC must retract false, defamatory, disparaging and inflammatory statements, must apologise. We've had both of those done now, and was threatening a lawsuit of $1 billion. So, yes, the apology, yes, we're not showing it again, but I think what's quite clear there is we strongly disagree. There is a basis for a defamation claim. Defamation basically means that there's any case for us to be sued. Yeah. So clearly the BBC pushing back on that. And this, sorry.
No, go on, Karen.
Well, this all relates, doesn't it, to the speech that was made in January 2021 by Donald Trump. And what his complaint has been is that that speech had a chunk taken out of the middle, two bits cut together. We keep hearing this word spliced, so spliced together, changing the meaning of it, basically suggesting that he wanted his supporters to walk with him to the Capitol building and riot, to fight like hell. Now, that wasn't, when you saw the whole speech, that wasn't actually what he said. And we heard a week or so ago about this Panorama programme that aired in October of 2024, where it had been edited. Now, the Telegraph have published a story saying, actually, it happened on Newsnight as well, another flagship BBC News programme.
Panorama,
over 2 years before. So we need to hear about that as well.
I mean, Emma, you're a seasoned journalist. You know how these things work. You know, often we have to bring people the news in an edited fashion for time purposes. You know, people can't listen to a whole speech. We edit it down. But there are rules at play here. You know, a simple explanation, for example, could be offered. If a mistake is made, an apology made. It seems like basic errors of journalism happened here.
Yeah, fundamentally, what you must never, ever be doing is changing the meaning of what someone's saying. And often a device will be used where there's a flash put in or something which really makes it clear, right, we've cut a chunk from this. And we use cutaways, which is an image that covers two joins, but fundamentally you must never, ever be changing the meaning. Ever must be changing the meaning. And actually what's interesting about the Newsnight programme, which has emerged from June 22, is that apparently there was a live guest on there. It was a former White House Chief of Staff who had actually left his job with Donald Trump, made it very clear he wasn't an apologist for the president, but said, actually, you've changed the meaning there.
He pulled them up on it live
on it, and apparently there was no correction of that. And apparently the next morning, in an editorial meeting, someone did raise their concerns and allegedly nothing was done about it then. But it is important to say that in response to this Newsnight story that's emerged now, a BBC spokesperson has said that the BBC holds itself to the highest editorial standards. This matter has been brought to our attention and we are now looking at it. But clearly, head in their hands, I'm sure, for the bosses that remain at the BBC, because, of course, the Director-General resigned on Sunday, Tim Davie. The Chief Executive of BBC News, Deborah Turness, resigned on Sunday. The BBC Chair has apologised, describing it as an error of judgment. And now we have a new twist on this, which is that we're now hearing about the BBC's response to that threat from Donald Trump's lawyers to sue for $1 billion, BBC making it very clear that we strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim.
Yeah, of course, there's been some debate over how the legalities of Donald Trump would sue for defamation for an organisation in the UK, but regardless of, you know, that discussion, it's still an alarming prospect, isn't it? The leader of the free world coming for you with a £1 billion lawsuit. It's worth bringing people just tuning in on whatever platform you're watching. Some of that apology, the BBC apologising to Donald Trump tonight for editing a speech to make it look like he had advocated violence, but rejected the president's demand for compensation. The broadcaster also saying in a statement it would not show that programme again on any BBC platform. The statement saying, while the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, we strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim. And that is interesting, isn't it, Emma? Because they can strongly disagree that there is a basis for a defamation claim. The president can still have another view of that, so it may not be done.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to help anyone, is it, that same speech, similar edit, different flagship programme. These comments, these apologies all relate to Panorama, October 2024. We're now also talking about Newsnight 2022. So it's not taking the sting out of this, is it? It's not reducing.
Do you think we'll get a response from the president today? Because we've just speaking to David Blevins in Washington a short time ago, and it was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon there. So time for the president to react. As far as we know, that apology has gone in today. So he will be aware of it well before we were aware of it. Do you think we may get a response?
Do we usually hear from the president?
Yeah, so probably,
I don't know.
Probably one of my sillier questions, but maybe I should have asked when. When will we hear? I'm sure we'll speak to David Blevins about that because, of course, the Jeffrey Epstein documents as well are dominating a lot of the conversation in Washington at the moment, and so many of the White House press conferences, Caroline Leavitt coming out to put across President Trump's point of view. But, of course, he doesn't always just use the sort of White House press room, does he? He uses Truth Social as well, so we should probably keep an eye on that, perhaps. Emma, if you wouldn't mind, one more time, just running us through the statements, because it's been coming through to us in dribs and drabs here tonight, as the BBC lets us know that they've actually apologised to the President of the United States directly for their editing of his January 6th speech.
So, yeah, we're talking now about Panorama, the story we've been talking about over the first scandal. Over the last week or so, an episode called Trump, A Second Chance. So this is the first statement we got not long ago, but the first of the two statements. This programme was reviewed after criticism of how President Donald Trump's 6th of January 2021 speech was edited. During that sequence, we showed excerpts taken from different parts of the speech. However, we accept that our edit unintentionally created the impression that we were showing a single continuous section of the speech rather than excerpts from different points in the speech, and that this gave the mistaken impression that President Trump had made a direct call for violent action. The BBC would like to apologise to President Trump for that error of judgment. This programme was not scheduled to be rebroadcast and will not be broadcast again in this form on any BBC platform. So there we have the apology, there we have the retraction, two of the demands. Then demand number three, threat number three, which is being sued for $1 billion, is dealt with at the bottom of this one.
Which many people have pointed out would be our money, taxpayer money, because of course the BBC publicly funded.
Indeed. This is the second statement, the key bit being right at the end. Lawyers for the BBC have written to President Trump's legal team in response to a letter received on Sunday. BBC Chair Samir Shah has separately sent a personal letter to the White House, making clear to President Trump that he and the corporation are sorry for the edit of the President's speech on the 6th of January 2021, which featured in the programme. The BBC has no plans to rebroadcast the documentary. We've heard that before, haven't we? This is the key bit. While the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, we strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim. So good luck in the courts, but we're fighting this.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, President Trump set a deadline of 10 o'clock tomorrow night for a response from the BBC. He's got an apology, but has he got the right response when it comes to sort of agreeing whether it was defamatory? I'm sure he'll let us know what his judgment is on that. Yes, no doubt. We will bring you that as soon as we get a response from President Trump. Emma Birchley, thank you so much. Emma, bringing us the breaking news tonight. The BBC apologising directly to Donald Trump over the editing of his January the 6th speech on a Panorama programme a number of years ago. Right, let's return to Cape Canaveral, shall we? We started the top of our programme there in Florida. We are expecting Jeff Bezos' New Glenn rocket to blast off on a mission to Mars within the next couple of minutes. We did tell you that as we came on at around 8 o'clock, but we are reliably informed. In fact, you can see it there on your screen now, that the countdown clock has officially started once again. It stopped at T-minus 20 seconds. It's now restarted at T-minus just under 2 minutes. Thomas Moore, our science correspondent, is back in the studio with me, having had his own rocket fuel, probably more coffee, because you've been waiting since Sunday for this to happen, Thomas.
Yeah, it has been a bit of a stop-start to this countdown too. They reset it and then they stopped it again, and then, oh, goodness me. And they haven't actually told us what went wrong, but clearly working through a few problems. This is just the second time that Blue Origin, the company founded by the Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, is trying to get off the ground with two NASA spacecraft on board. They're heading to Mars, but then once they are sent on their way, Jeff Bezos and his team will be very much hoping that the bottom half of this rocket, the booster, will come back down and land on a ship 350 miles off the Florida coast. That would make it only the second company to have a rocket that can be reused again and again, a bit like turning around an aircraft. That's what's bringing down the cost of space, and it would mean that the two richest men would be going head-to-head, a billionaire's space race that could lead them to dominate access to near-Earth orbit. Whether that's good or bad, I'll leave that for you to judge.
How much is riding on this for Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin then?
A lot, because he very much wants to be taking on Elon Musk. He doesn't want access to space be left just to one man, because that's largely what it is at the moment. Elon Musk's SpaceX really is dominating launch capability at the moment because they can do it so much cheaper than anybody else.
Well, here you go, Thomas. Let's listen to the final countdown, shall we, as we approach T minus 10 seconds.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift up, detected. Tense motion. Everyone has cleared the towers. Pushing 7 good engines. 30 seconds into flight. Engine operating parameters continue with good at full thrust. Body rate response to normal. 40 seconds in. End of roll strakes now level. 50 seconds into flight, continue to see good engine operating parameters, all set for
a clean burn. We're coming up here on max Q, maximum dynamic pressure. This is the hardest point on the vehicle when it comes to the pressures and the speed. We want to see this rocket punch through that max Q.
good seat control, good MR control. 1 minute, 15 seconds in. Now passing Mach 1, new one is now supersonic.
Supersonic! And we can hear the
1 minute, 30 seconds. Engine operating parameters continue to look good at full thrust. Max Q, maximum dynamic pressure. One minute, 45 seconds in.
Thomas, at points like this, I really want to ask an insightful question, but all I can think of is how cool is that?
Yeah, really cool, isn't it? You can see the 7 bright lights of the engines at the bottom there of the booster stage, firing that up now 1,900 miles an hour, and it's only been going for 2 minutes. But it has passed through what they call max Q. That is the point of maximum pressure on the structure of the rocket. It's got through that. It's heading into space very rapidly now. In a minute's time, less than that, 35 seconds time, we'll see the main engines cut off, and then shortly after that we'll see separation of the 2 halves of the rocket, and that is a big moment because after that the upper stage containing the 2 NASA spacecraft will go on into orbit and then towards Mars on a long voyage that will take 11 months. They're going to go and park in space for a while before they head to the red planet to do their science. But the bottom half of the rocket, the booster stage, they will attempt to bring that down to land it on a floating platform off the Florida coast. It's only ever been done by one other company, SpaceX, of course. The odds are pretty slim, and there we can see the engines beginning to fade, and they have cut out.
And we have ignition on stage 2. Both engine parameters look good.
Ignition! Oh, you see the 2 rockets there?
Body rate stamping out nicely. Both B3U engines look good at high thrust set point. Body rate responses look good. 3 minutes, 43 seconds into flight.
Look at that view.
We have good indication of payload fairing jettison. Both B3U engines continue to look good. Body rate response is normal. Seeing good data coming down from both stages.
Great data. We're 4 minutes into NG2. And you saw
pressure response on these 2 look good.
down from our GS2.
Continue to look good. This is a 9.5 minute burn for GS2. 4 minutes, 25 seconds into flight.
Wow. All right, at 9 minutes is when we're expecting the first stage to touch down